All right. Well, greetings, everyone.
Mhm.
Welcome to those who are just joining. This is Writing for Your Life Second Tuesdays and writing discussion group for writers. And I'm so excited and thrilled to have Nya Abernathy as our guest speaker. I met Nya originally in Atlanta. She was at the 2023 Atlanta Writing for Life conference and got to hear her. Speaking of open mic, we were talking about the open mic night events. Got to hear her speak and do a reading at the open mic event in Atlanta, which was really fun. So we reconnected after that, and I'm just delighted to have her here as our guest speaker. And let me just tell you a little bit about Nya, and then I want to hand it over to her as quickly as possible. Nya Abernathy is an educator, writer, speaker, and consultant. She is the founder of the Dignity Effect, creator of and writer at Of Earth and of Stars, and she is the author of the forthcoming book, Welcome Wonder. And she's going to be talking to us tonight about writing from a whole place, and particularly the role of self-advocacy in resonant writing. And so, again, without further ado, I just want to thank you, Nya, for being here. Congratulations on your forthcoming book. And perhaps you can just start by telling us a little bit more about you and just leading us in the discussion. And for those who are regulars at our second Tuesday, we're going to do a little bit more of a different format. And Nya is going to lead us through kind of quite a bit of, I think, interactive discussion. And so I encourage you all to participate. And now I'm here to help you with moderation if you want. If you want me to help with facilitation, just let me know. But I'll hand it over to you and thank you again.
Thank you so much. Yes, I would love for you to help with moderation. There will be a lot of invitations to be in the chat, to come off mute, all those things. So, uh, hello again. My name is Nya Abernathy, and I'm joining you from the ancestral lands of the Muskogee Creek and Eastern Cherokee people. I honor their stewardship of these lands for centuries, and I am a direct beneficiary of their stewardship and their love. And I also honor their descendants, many of which are not on these lands, and that's not okay. So, my hope, and I hope our energy goes towards, among other things, making sure that they can come back on their own terms and reconnect with their place if that's what they desire to do. So I, like Kate said, I'm many things, multivocational, which I actually picked up that term at Writing for Your Life last year. I am an adult social emotional well-being specialist. I am a soul care sommelier, and I am a purveyor of wonder and awe. And I am these things in my roles as a writer, facilitator, an educator, and coach. So I have the pleasure of hosting spaces and facilitating spaces and guiding groups in a lot of different ways. And so there are a few rituals that I do at the beginning of each gathering that I facilitate. So the first thing is I welcome you, and I welcome all of you. Uh, the whole of you is welcome in this space. And I am really grateful that each and every one of you are here with me. And I don't take it for granted that you're here. And you being here really makes this space specific and special. So thank you for coming. So next we do a two-part check-in. First, we're gonna ground together in a 1 minute deep intentional breath exercise. And we'll do something really simple, some box breathing. So if you've never done box breathing before, it is, like I said, intentional deep breathing. And I'll count us off. We'll do it twice. I'll count us off the first time. You'll kind of, it's a quick rhythm you'll pick up on. And then we'll just kind of internally keep that rhythm as we breathe together. So the way it goes is you breathe in for a count of four. You breathe in for a count of four. I'm going to draw a box. You hold for a count of four. You breathe out for a count of four. And then you hold for a count of four. And then we'll do that again. So again, I will count us off on that first box. And then the second box we will do silently. And then we'll come back for our last check-in after that. Okay. So we will breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and in. Mm. So I hope that you feel a little bit more settled in your body and grounded in our space after that. And the last thing that we'll do before we dive in is I'm going to share a tool that I use all the time. And I'm going to share my screen to do that. And it's an emotion wheel. And we're going to do a check-in. And I will post a question in the chat so that you have it for reference. But you're going to check this wheel out and you are going to answer. You're going to fill in two blanks in a one sentence question. One blank is going to be the feeling. The next blank is going to be what's causing me to feel that way. So I am showing up tonight feeling blank, feeling about blank. And it could be about anything. It does not have to be about this space. And if you would like, you can put your answer in the chat or you can just write it down in your notebook. I'm just making assumption that everybody here has something to write with. But you can just put it down there. And if you want to spend a minute or two kind of just thinking about that, that's fine. Um, so we'll do that. I'll give y'all just like I said, about a minute. And if you want to share, welcome to in the chat. I'm loving these answers in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, yeah, it means a lot for you all to show up in this space. Thank you for participating too, even if you're not participating in the chat. Appreciate you. All right. So thanks for showing up in these rhythms that I like to keep when I am facilitating a space. It's very intentional. It'll come up later as to why. And it also helps us to co-create the way this space feels. So thank you. So I learned from so many people. And one of my favorite people to learn from is a friend and colleague and facilitator and writer, Tamise Spencer Helms. And I've also learned being in space with the Ashiwi people who are located in where we now call New Mexico, about a very particular wisdom, which is that wisdom enters a room from all of us. I am not the only one coming here with wisdom about the topic. You too enter in with experience that you have learned from, and it is worthy of being shared. And so, in light of that, I want to open our discussion and our dialogue. You can put this in the chat. If you want to raise your hand, Kate, I will let you, my screen, I don't know if I can see even who's raising their hands, so I will let you handle that. But if there's maybe one or two folks that want to come off mute and share, the question is, what wisdom do you already hold around self-advocacy? I'll put it in the chat. Wisdom do you already hold around self-advocacy? And none is the wrong answer.
And for those who don't know, there's the raise hand function at the bottom. Maybe I'll just throw one in since I came off mute and then maybe hand it to Sarah.
Yeah.
I'm like practicing learning boundaries again. I feel like I never maybe even really learned what a boundary was officially back in when I could have when I was like in my 20s or teens. And so I'm sort of relearning boundaries, it feels like in middle age.
Mhm.
Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. I was gonna say, one thing is that I mean well, so sometimes self-advocacy is also advocacy for other people.
Nice. Thank you.
There's some good comments in the chat too, Nya. I don't know if you want me to read those or.
Yeah, go for it. I've kind of got it so I can see some of them coming in, but please, let's share.
So I see from Elizabeth, no, it's not a cuss word. It sets boundaries. Pen writes, it's okay to say no, even to good things. Michelle writes, I am not powerless. If I sit with my needs, I can express them clearly. And Diana writes, be kind and gentle towards myself and others. Are there others who want to come off mute and add something verbally?
This,
Becca writes that I'm valuable.
okay.
These are great,
This
y'all.
is Barbara.
And we
Thank
have,
you.
is it Bernard?
Yes, Bernard. Yes, thank you. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for having this space. Um, you know what? At this time, it's funny because self-advocacy, I have to lean more into that right now in this season. In many ways, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, I shrunk myself. I I shrunk myself to kind of conform to other people. So at this point, it's like, you know what? Now I really gotta advocate for myself. I really gotta self-focus. I really have to you know, stop walking uh small, stop living small, stop being small, and not be afraid to be my full self.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take
And we have
one
Barbara.
more.
Barbara raised her hand. Go ahead, Miss Barbara.
Barbara, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Um, what my advocacy statement is this: taking care of myself, both mentally and physically, is the best way to take care of others.
Beautiful and very true. Thank you. And Kate, I will share this with you and the group. One of my favorite definitions of boundaries comes from Prentice Hemphill, and they are coming out with a book. It comes out in June. I'm so excited to read it. But they said that boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and love myself simultaneously. So boundaries can often just feel like a no or like this like wall you put up to keep you separate. And I just love that reimagining of that definition. I think it gives a lot of freedom and space and breadth to what a boundary can be and its purpose and function in relationship. So thank you all so much for sharing. There's so much wisdom and it's in the chat and you came off mute and said it. So we are coming to this table together and I'm really grateful to have you here. So, as we talk about wholeness and self advocacy that ultimately leads to writing that resonates, I want you to remember the wisdom you are showing up with. This is going to be a dialogue. It's not a lecture hall, so stay in conversation with everything I offer here. And I'm going to very purposely invite you into conversation throughout our time together. Ways that you can stay in conversation in the chat. I come from a Pentecostal background, so I want you to talk back. You can talk back in the chat if you want to do emojis in the corner, if you want to raise your hand and say, I have something to say, um, I will try and get to as many people as I can throughout, but I'm inviting the dialogue. Don't feel like you have to sit back and just listen to me. We are in conversation with one another. And this is, if it gets short or if you are like, I don't share this publicly, you can also follow up with me as well afterwards. So you have already started us in on the goods. And if you're here, I'm assuming that you are a word person just like me. And so let's get started with some definitions. If you Google resonate, there's several definitions that will come up. and picked a couple for us to kind of focus in on as we talk about this kind of writing. One, resonate is to produce or be filled with a deep, full, reverberating sound. That's one definition of resonate. And another one is to meet with someone's agreement in idea or action. So when we talk about resonant writing, when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about writing whose sound matches the reader's experience. So writing whose sound matches the reader's experience. That's what resonant writing is. And we can be in conversation about that definition as well. And I'll put that in the chat as it's something that we can continue to come back to. So how do you do that? Right? I think that's every person who wants to write and wants people to read their writing, right, has this question. And I even think that if you're writing for yourself, you still want it to be resonant even with you as you read it back. So here's a shortcut to matching your reader's experience. Sound like yourself. Authenticity, not imitation, is the through way to connective writing, right? And that's probably not news to many of you, right? That authenticity is how you go from your pen to somebody's heart. And so these things are really important. We're laying a foundation. So in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a little and 5 being a lot, I would like you to share in general, how tired are you? Are you like, I'm good, I'm rested, I'm hydrated, I'm like wonderfully nourished, my relationships are beautifully intact and supportive at all times? Or if you're 5 and you're like, I'm dragging my body through the day, and sometimes my mind is there, sometimes. Hey, y'all, I said 1 to 5, and there's 7s and 6s in the actual chat. What's happening? Can we give these people a vacation, please? There's some 2s, which is lovely. Yes, 3s. So much. I heard 10. Child, if there's a 10 in the room. So this is real. After your intentional self-care, Kate's at a 2. Woohoo! It's 5 o'clock here. Listen, need a nap. I said 1 to 5. Letitia, I hope I'm saying your name right. Letitia said, need a nap. That's where I am on the scale. This is real, right? This is real. And I can also ask you, and you can put a Y or an N, yes or no, does your level of tiredness affect your writing? How often you write, how long you're able to write, how the quality of the writing that you're able to do, how long you're able to sit with your ideas and like really let them process and massage them, right? It affects that. So these are not disconnected things. So go with me. I promise we're going to bring it all back around. So writing is so much more, right, than just sitting down at your physical or virtual page and putting words down. It's more than that. It happens before, it happens after. You have a conversation with somebody, your body and your soul process it, and then out comes these ideas that you want to put on paper, add to a story that you're working on, whatever, right? You get information from somewhere else and it synthesizes somewhere inside of you, or it gets connected to something else. So the writing happens before the writing happens. And to get to the writing that you want to resonate with your reader, you have to take care of some things. And the first thing you need to take care of is you. The first soul for you to resonate with is your own. So I'm going to pause. I've said a lot of things. You guys have been so great in the chat. I want to invite any thoughts, anything you want to be in conversation with. You can put in the chat. You can raise your hand about resonant writing, about how tired you are, about your soul being the first soul to resonate with before you resonate with someone else's.
We have a hand from David Turner.
Hi. Um, Good evening.
Wow.
I think I like the idea, when the first thing I get up in the morning and, do everything I need to do and get a nice breakfast and get coffee in me. I have so many ideas. And then about an hour later, all my ideas seem stupid. And at that point, I listened to a number of writers saying, well, just write anyway. You know, write every single day, right? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes. And it really doesn't sound that much for real. But I guess I take some solace in when it comes time to whether I feel good or bad, I can write in my journal. And I can write for a while in my journal. It makes me wonder, how do I get from the point of writing everything in my journal to the point where I'm writing that I can possibly, post somewhere or actually do that. It just seems like when I'm writing for me, I really don't have any problem writing, but trying to resonate with anybody else, I get a sort of a anxiousness saying, well, am I really writing for somebody? Is anybody going to catch what I'm trying to write? Am I being irresponsible for writing to other people, making it sound almost as if, well, if you don't resonate with me, well, too bad. You cannot participate in my journey. It's very confusing and anxious for me trying to write for somebody else as opposed to just simply, I can just write my true feelings on a piece of paper that no one will ever see. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And then we had a hand also from Ruth. And then maybe Nya will hand it back to you. Ruth, do you want to go ahead?
I'll try. I was feeling brilliant, and now the brilliance has just left, which probably is demonstrative of where I be. I think, oh my goodness.
Back to you too, if
So
you want. Ruth.
the notion, I'm sorry, say it again.
Back to you if you want. Your choice.
It's fine. So the whole notion of writing from a whole place, role of self-advocacy and resonant writing. I think, and part of this comes from the number of conversations I have with students and folks in their 20s. So I'm 59, and so I wasn't in the 60s. I mean, I was, but I don't remember diddly do. And then there's been sense of hope, and now it just feels like there's so much global hopelessness. And I'm pretty good at removing myself from that with my personality. I can be pretty surgical up to a point. And then I just feel like this malaise. So then I go to it, I listen to it, I journal, I talk to Jesus, I go for a walk, I pet my dog, I make a cup of tea, all the stuff. But I think when there are these injection points, like everybody's focused on the Super Bowl, and Rafa gets devastated. In some of those places, whether it's Yemen and Sudan, and we've had issues like that all the time, but it's rather large right now. So when you talked about writing whose sound matches a reader's experience, I'm eager to hear what else you have to say, because where I live, I'm not clear that they have ears to hear. They like MAGA, but I don't know if they can hear it. So it's a lament.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate you, David and Ruth, sharing about those things. And here's what I will say, both to this feeling of anxiety, which I'm very familiar with, David, and Ruth, this feeling of, is anybody actually listening? Also familiar with. It's truer than you think. It's truer than maybe you believe, and it's truer probably maybe even than you have experienced, that the people who want to hear from your heart, they are they are here. They might not be in your town. They might not be on your social media right now. They might not be subscribed to your newsletter at this moment, but there are people who are waiting to hear from your heart, and they want to. I'm not a marketer, so I don't have any magic dust around how to get those people's eyes on your stuff. Part of getting them is to put it out there so that there's something for them to get, which we will, and some of the things that y'all touched on we will get to. But I wanted to offer that. And again, this is a dialogue. So if somebody else has some offering for either of those concerns, because they're very real, please, again, put them in the chat. Because they're both very real. And you could have a plan. I love what you said, David. Like, you get up, you do the coffee, you do the thing, like you've got a process, Ruth, you have a process, and then you get to the page and you're like, what am I doing? All of these are very real experiences for writers and many, many, many creatives. And I think the invitation for us that always remains is whether you write every day or not. I do not write every day. I tried, it's really hard. Is that you just commit to keep writing. Even if it's every other day or it's every 3 days, you just say, but I'm going to keep going. That's really key and important, and also part of self-advocacy, because you then have to say, if I am going to decide to continue to do this, there's ways that I have to prioritize that space. And it's going to look different for everybody, but it is advocating for this thing that you are like, I want and have a desire to do this, and I'm committing to do it. So, okay, I know the chat is popping.
And there's one other hand raised. Jenny, do you want to come on? And hi, Jenny, do you want to come off mute and add something to the space?
Sure. I think I thank you, all of you, for what you said, and I agree with all of you. But I think part of self-advocacy for me has also been learning when to be quiet and not to get into the melee of this, the swine before pigs kind of comment that Jesus made of, and I don't know you, Ruth, but I feel what you're saying, and I didn't want to be identified as a Christian writer, definitely not evangelical, and trying to find so I don't know who resonates with me, disaffected, right? But yet I love God as Trinity. So there you go. So for me, it was also learning, just telling God, I don't know when I need to speak right now, and I don't know who should hear anything, and I'm going to let you kind of help show me that. And it's just like you said, Nya, it's not up to me to decide who needs to hear what I have to say. But it is up to me. If I hear that I'm supposed to write something, then be willing to do it. And I guess that's always a dance for me, when to be quiet, when to say something. Is it really me that needs to say this? Or could somebody else say it? And and I don't jump into all kinds of things that I have opinions on anymore, because I find it too fatiguing. So I'm reserving my writing for something that's really meant for me specifically. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Nya, David raised his hand again. I don't know if you want to go back to David.
Take one more real quick before we move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
David.
What was just said, uh, made me wonder. And it's just a question I hope that you can address as well as we move on. You know, I don't know what everyone thinks about Jesus, but a quote just sort of popped into my head, in which he went to each of his disciples and he told them, I will make you a fisherman of men. And it made me think that, at least in one case, Jesus' self advocacy, and the things that he believed and all that stuff, he didn't have to necessarily be the writer. So I would like to know, with the self advocacy, is one of the reasons for it is we may have to seek our own, for lack of a better term, um, apostles if we are unable to write what we believe on now, such as in my case. It's easier for me to write in my journal than it is to post it aloud. Does it kind of make sense that there's another way of self-advocacy that can lead to a writing anyway, even if it's not necessarily all the time ourselves? Thanks.
Thanks, David.
All right. Yeah, I want to get to you, Amy, but we'll come back in just a second, okay? Thank you all for entering in the dialogue. This is real because these are the things that we bring with us in our pursuit to write the things that are in our heart and in our minds. So, I have a question that I'm wrestling with whether or not I'm going to ask it right now or at all. I'm not. We might come back to it. Actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and ask it just because of some of the stuff that came up. I think it'll still work. Okay, and this is just for you to think about. You can write this down in your journal. It could be a question you can come back to later. When we're talking about resonating with our own soul, are there places, are there ways that you are not resonating with your own soul, where you do not sound like yourself? Either the self that you where your own voice or efforts don't feel or sound authentic, and that it could be in your writing, but it could be in other ways. It can be in the ways that you show up in relationships. It can be in the ways that you move in the world in different contexts. And it can be for a lot of different reasons. There's also no shame. Like, we are humans who are moving through a world the best that we can. But I just want you to consider that question. Are there spaces, are there ways where you don't resonate with your own soul? You don't sound like yourself. And again, this is self-reflective. Whether you quickly were able to write something down or whether you're going to come back to that question, here's what I want you to know is that whatever your answer is, that's what's calling for your self-advocacy. You have wisdom. Being able to answer this question is some of that wisdom that you have. Is what parts of you, what parts of your life, what parts of the ways that you show up in the world or in relationships are calling for some self-advocacy. So yeah, and I wish I kind of said this beforehand, but this is not about you being like, here's where I'm doing it wrong, or here's where I'm not good enough. This is about you just being aware and connected to yourself, being able to be honest with yourself. Some of you are sharing in the chat, which I super appreciate that. And a lot of you aren't. And you don't have to share it with anybody, because this is about you being in touch with who you are, and where you want to be. in the spaces that are the parts of you that are calling for some care and some attention, and you saying, yes, I will give care and attention to these parts of myself. Yes, if I try to sound like someone else, and that's what I said when I said, what is the shortcut, right, to resonant writing? It's sounding like yourself. And so the questions around like, but the anxiety, or is anybody listening, or doesn't matter, how do we do this? Uh, one of the first things is to sound like you. And that authenticity, when it shows up, people resonate with it. All right, so I'm gonna tap on someone's shoulder. I didn't tell her what I was gonna ask, but I did say, can I tap on your shoulder tonight? And she said yes. Marla Taviano is a dear, 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 dear friend of mine, and she is in the room tonight. She's releasing a book titled Whole. And I'd like her to come off mute and share with us what whole is meaning to her these days. What does whole mean? I will also say, as she's preparing and thinking about the question that I did not ask her beforehand, she sent me this cute thing. It's backwards. I love it. It says committed to your wholeness. And I know what that means when she sends it to me, and I'm deeply appreciative of it. But as a part of us moving through this topic together, Marla, will you share with us what is whole meaning to you these days?
Thank you, Nya. Can you hear me? I don't have my AirPods weren't working. Okay. And thank you also sarcastically for not telling me the question. And yes, I am releasing a book, and I should have this like elevator pitch thing about wholeness, which I don't. So we'll just go with it. The committed to your wholeness, actually, that came about our mutual friend, Trey Ferguson. He defines love as the commitment to wholeness. And he and I have had a lot of talks about this, because as I deconstructed from a very conservative evangelical faith, I had some people who are still there where I was tell me that I was wrong to love my queer friends or to love my Muslim friends. And I had even my own sister, who disowned me for a time, and we still haven't seen each other, told me that sometimes love feels like hate, Marla. And to me, it got to the point where if I thought that obeying God and God's word and the Bible required me to love someone in a way that felt like hate to them, then I didn't want any part of that. And when Trey and I got to talking, so now I pretty much, I don't necessarily even call myself a Christian right now at this point. I haven't given it up entirely, but my friend Trey is a pastor, so we'll have a lot of talks. And when he said love is the commitment to wholeness, that just really got me. I'm like, that's it. If I'm going to follow a God, I want a God who, when that God loves me, that means that God is committed to my wholeness, not for me to fit in a certain box or be a certain way, but to be all the way me. And when you're asking about the writing resonating, I've been writing for a really long time. I have 4 books out in the world with my name on them and my conservative Christian theology and ideas about marriage and parenting and all this. And I'm not even married anymore. But I'm realizing, as I look back into the past so that I can move forward, that I was for a long, long time not able to be my whole self. My ex-husband in evangelical Christianity in particular wanted me to be smaller and less than who I was, and not my whole full self. And coming into that and realizing I have to figure out who I am, first of all, because I wasn't allowed to be a certain way. Like so many of my queer friends who weren't allowed to be their full selves and love Jesus, or so they were told. And now figuring out ways, I can still love Jesus if I want, and I can be all the way who I am. So when I hear people talking tonight about writing things down, but then being anxious to share them, and I just think we have so much in us that has kept us from being able to be wholly, fully ourselves. And so this book that's coming out is the third book in a trilogy, actually. And the first one is called Unbelieve, where I talk about deconstructing my faith. The second one is Jaded, where I was just in this kind of dark, angry spot, angry at white evangelical Christianity in particular. And then Whole, it doesn't end with a tidy bow. It doesn't end with me magically being all the way whole now. It's a very long process, but I am loving it. Was it easy? No. Is it easy? No. But being myself and encouraging other people to be themselves, and you and I have talked about it so often because we have so much in common, and then also so many different things. You teach me things, I teach you things, and it's being able to be in relationship with people and bringing out who they are, helping them see who they are, reflecting that back to them. And that's how your writing can resonate with people, even if you're not the same. People will read my poems and they'll say things like, oh, I love how you did this, and it made me think of this and that. That wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even think of that. But because I was writing from who I was, they can sense that and they see themselves in it. It's this magical thing, but it doesn't happen overnight. I've been at this for a long, long, long time. And thankfully, even back when I was writing really conservative Christian stuff, I was still getting my thoughts out there. I was still working on things. I was still trying to love people, all of that. So that wasn't wasted. And I'm even now able to use that in my writing now. So I want everyone to be encouraged to be, like you said before, be who you are, not who someone else is. And everyone is not going to resonate with you. Everyone's not going to like you. That's hard for me sometimes. I want all the people to like me. But at the end of this new book that I've written, not to spoil it, but I say, more than I want to be free, more than I want to be successful, more than I want, like all the things, I want to be whole. Like that's what I want more than anything. And that's what I want for everybody else too. And it's so much better than love that feels like hate, when it's love that feels like wholeness. And I'm just glad that I figured it out when I did. I'm 48 and hopefully I have a long time left to be whole. Thanks for letting me share, Nya.
Thank you, Marla. Thank you. Yes. That was really good. Thank you. I want to pause and honor before I move forward. Vicky had a question, I believe. And Vicky, I don't know if you want to go ahead and hop back in or if you want to wait for a minute. Oh, I can't. You sound really muffled.
We're having a little trouble hearing you. Can you try again?
That any better? Sorry.
Vicky's a regular, and I know her audio is usually fine, but we're having trouble hearing you, Vicky.
I have a new computer, so it's a problem, but
Yeah, it's like you're underwater. Maybe you can, maybe we can type it. Maybe you can type it, Vicky, or we can come back to you. I'm sorry.
Another suggestion could be if you log out and log back in. That helps some of my students.
If you want to do that, I'll let you back in later.
Thank you, Ruth.
All right, and there's some great comments in the chat. We won't read them all, or unless Nya, you want me to, but I'll hand it back to you now.
You can pick 2 or 3 and read. Yeah, real quick. And then we'll.
Well, I don't know if you want to go back. There's some comments before Marla spoke, so maybe you want to move forward and then we can look back at the comments.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you again, Marla, for sharing about what wholeness means to you. And I hope that there are things you could pick up from what she said that you can take with you as we continue to talk about this. So, earlier I shared about the shortcut to resonant writing. And I said, sound like yourself. There's also a flow that you can get into, right? There's a shortcut and there's a flow, and the flow, it's like water, right? It nourishes you, it nourishes whoever is like downstream, if you will, of what you're giving and putting out there. And so the way that you get to that flow of matching your reader's experience, right? Resonant writing is writing that sounds like it matches your reader's experience. And the flow of that is when you sound like your whole self, the kind of whole that Marla was talking about. Sounding like a self that is healed and healing. Marla's like, I'm whole and I am still becoming whole. It is a both and. It is an already but not yet. It's those things. Sounding like a self that shows up in the world whole when you're not writing, right? And then you bring all of that energy to the time when you are writing. Uh, I have not experienced myself, seen or heard anyone who can live contorting themselves to everyone else's shoulds, being burnt out on the expectations of others, and then magically sitting down to write from a place of wholeness. You get there by practicing resonance with your own soul. Marla has shared, she's like, it took a long time. And I went through seasons and I felt different ways and all of those things. It is a practice, this practice of self-advocacy, this practice of resonating with your own soul, this practice of moving into this place of being resonant. It's something you do over time. And it's also something we do in community. So I think I saw someone make a comment about like coming together with other writers and being in spaces together. And that is a huge part of it too. So, some suggestions about what this can look like, these practices, but the wisdom in the room is not just coming from me, as we have already seen in the chat and off of mute. So I want you to tell me, and if Vicky's back in the room, Vicky can go first and ask the question that she had, and I can put this question in the chat. What are ways that you can practice your own soul resonance? How can you regularly show up in the world honest about who you are and what you need outside of your writing time? Those things, who are you and what do you need? Those are the things that will inform your self-advocacy. And as you practice self-advocating, you will open up into a space of more wholeness, more authenticity, and then be able to show up in a space of writing and with that same energy. So again, the question, I'm going to put it in the chat, is how can you regularly show up in the world honest about who you are and what you need outside of your writing time? Again, I have suggestions, but I want to hear, what's the wisdom in the room? How do you do that? Some of y'all talked about making tea, going for a walk. I get up and I have a good breakfast and I da da da. What are the ways? Honest about who you are and honest about what you need.
And let's try Vicky again and see if her audio's better. Vicky, do you want to try?
Yeah, this is a sound check, actually. How is that? Oh, good.
Nice.
I
Much
turned off
better.
my Bluetooth. I turned off my Bluetooth speaker. I just wanted to say, and I typed it in the comments to respond to Jenny. She had mentioned earlier, what value does my opinion have? Why should I add it? And I think it's always valuable to add my voice to the voices of others, because together, when we have a collective voice, I think we're more apt to be heard out in the world. And so I think it's always valuable to add your voice to others, Jenny. And I think that also is a bit of an answer to the most recent question that you asked. So yeah, add your voice.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, I love that. That's a wonderful way to practice your own soul resonance and showing up honest as yourself and what you need. Again, a lot of what we need is to come together in community. And depending on what that community is and the way it functions, the dynamics, those all specifics depend on where you are. But just the commitment to saying, I'm going to show up with other people and be committed to this process of writing in wholeness and putting something out in the world that sounds like it matches the experience of those that I want to connect with, and that I want to be a part of and with is important, right?
Maybe I can add something here, which is so at the event that I met Nya at the Writing for Life conference last year. Barbara Brown Taylor was our keynote speaker, and at one point she said something about competing with yourself as a writer, and I really didn't like know what that meant at the time, but I've thought a lot about it. And some of you know I've written a couple books, and I just met with my editor of my last book, Reclaiming Rest, about 2 weeks ago, and in that call I heard like the genres that they are interested, the genres that they're not interested, like the genres. And so one of the things, and Marla, you'll be proud of me, being inspired by my poetry friends. My husband and I are thinking about co-authoring a book of poetry. Some people know he was recently diagnosed with Parkinson's, and my editor, again, I know fully that there's other publishers in the world, but it's like we're not interested in poetry. Like it doesn't sell. I can't get it through my internal editorial board, and I know, but I think part of for me self-advocacy and is like, am I going to go for like success and you know pub all the traditional publishing bells and whistles, and to what end and for what purpose, and and um, or am I going to be really doing the writing that I feel like God is calling me to do next? And I think that now that I know enough about the publishing industry, there's such a temptation to try to like follow a template or follow the thing that people tell you should be doing. And anyway, I'm not sure if that's helpful, but just adding that into the circle. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Some good stuff in the chat too.
Is it okay if I just offer a piggyback on that?
Yeah, except I think like Ruth, if you let's let Margot go first because she hasn't spoken, then I'll come back to you. That sounds good. Margot and then Ruth.
Thank you. I can't find my raised hand. I've been looking for it. I just wanted to say that I think there's a responsible way to show up for yourself. And for me in particular, I have so many people who are pulling on me in a loving way. I'm a grandmother, a wife. I have a daughter who's a mother of 3, and she always needs help. And so in order for me to show up in my writing, I have to make sure all of these pieces are occupied and good. I have to make sure they're good so that I can sit down and just be selfish and write. And but taking care of them first to me has been it's been a burden, but it's also been a responsibility. And I think that has been a challenge when it comes to my writing, finding that space that I need and where in the order of all my priorities should it be. And I guess I've made the decision that they do come first.
Yeah, thank you, Margot. And again, going back to this invitation about honest about who you are and what you need. And you're like, I need to put these people first, and I need to carve out some time for myself and put some boundaries or the distance as which I can love you and myself simultaneously. And I would venture that for many of us, writing is an act of love for ourselves. Whether someone else reads it or not, it is an act of self-love. And the boundaries that you put around your relationships or your responsibilities don't have to be tight and constricted. It could just be like, I'm going to do this thing. This is how much time I have to do it. And at the end of this, like, I have to go do something else. So encourage just bringing us back to that definition, and that boundaries don't have to feel like a cutting off. They can feel like an ebb and flow, and they could feel very loving for you and for the other person. Yeah, I hear you saying, and if use whatever language works for you. And I hear you saying, I need to be selfish. I think you really are just wanting to practice some self-love and do that in a way of that writing practice is part of that self-love. Okay. I know there's another question. I'll go ahead and get to it because I know we're running short. We're almost done. Y'all are wonderful. It's been amazing.
And I think we're going to go back to Ruth. Ruth, do you want to jump back in?
Yeah, and I could just message it to you, but for whatever it's worth, because it may affect other folks. Um, Elizabeth Gilbert in her book Big Magic talk about how, however we see it, energy, power, higher power, God, that God makes things happen. And I think about that with Michelle Alexander and Isabel Wilkerson. They were writing similar stuff simultaneously, even though they had not talked. And so, Kate, for you or for anybody else who wonders like what it looks like for our voices to matter, when the Spirit nudges us, I believe it's holy. And you may want to talk to the Michael J. Fox Foundation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Because the editors
Nya.
aren't good. That's it.
Go ahead, Nya. Thank you, Ruth.
All right. Thank you all for these suggestions around this question. And so here are some of mine. I appreciate this wisdom that's coming in. These are quick ones. Movement is a suggestion of how you can get what you need and be who you are. That could look different. My husband is a salsa dancer. He's not a runner. So movement is not him running 3 miles. Movement is him being like, let's put on some salsa music and dance in the living room. You know, so whatever that looks like for you, but this the somatic component of you being whole is extraordinarily important. It can look like yoga, breathing, like playing. If you have, I'm thinking about Margot, your grandkids. If it looks like I'm gonna play outside my grandkids and try to keep up with them for like 5-10 minutes, whatever that is. So movement is something to connect and really lay this foundation of practicing resonance with your own soul. What do you need in that space? 15 minutes of yes time every day. Some of us are like, what? There's some days that I teach on this stuff. Like I literally teach people these things and I say you should take 15 minutes of time to yourself every day. And there are some days I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. I'm married, I run a business, I'm a writer. Some days I don't got 15. I don't give myself the 15 minutes. I'm not gonna say I don't have it. I don't give it to myself. But it is the intention and the trajectory and towards that practice. 15 minutes every day. It could be during your morning cup of coffee. It could be right before you go to bed. It could be a break in the middle of the day. 15 minutes. And what does that yes look like? What does it look like for you to say yes to yourself for 15 minutes, right? Whether you call that being selfish or whether you call it self-love, like what does it look like for you to say yes to yourself for 15 minutes? Another suggestion, and some of this came up in the chat, intentional, meaningful connection with humans and more than human beings. I am a huge advocate of going outside, walking amongst trees. If there's a trail nearby, if you can go kind of get lost in a wooded area, or like a stretch of grassy stuff that doesn't have a bunch of like man-made environment in it, that's huge. Having really intentional, meaningful connections with other humans that you care about and love, conversation, playing, whatever those things are. These are the things that I talk about when I talk about soul care, which is something again that I do for my job. And so these are some of the suggestions that I hope are like stoking your imagination for what it can look like. And these things might seem separate. You're like, what does movement have to do with me writing? Again, writing happens before and after you are at the page. And there is a preparation of yourself that happens before you enter into that space. And this is part of it. And your soul is the first soul to resonate with. And caring for yourself is the first one for you to care for before you seek to care for others with your words. And so this is why I'm just bringing those suggestions up. And I hope that those connections have been made for you tonight. I know we're really close to time. Typically, we will go through another round of box breathing and I would give a brief blessing. I don't know if we have time for that. If there's any more questions, I do want to offer time for that too.
Absolutely. And first of all, let's do the box breathing if you're willing to stay on, Nya, and the blessing. But just want to, before you do that, thank you so much. This has been a really provocative conversation for me, and just the discussion and your ideas and the conversation that we had as a group. So thank you all so much for participating. I just want to also remind you all that we're having a special week and we're doing 2 events this week. And so we have another event tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And we have another regular of our Tuesday night groups has co-authored a book of blessings for spiritual writers. And they mailed me a copy, and it was just like, I had, again, which I often do with my Writing for Your Life colleagues and friends, like, this is my tribe, these are people who really get it, what it means to be a faith-based spiritual writer, and like what blessings are needed on the journey. So I encourage you all, if you haven't already registered, and if you're able to join tomorrow, I put the link in the chat. And then before we close, again, just to thank you, Nya, and maybe Nya, before you give us again our blessing and our breathing, I know you have a book coming out, and maybe you can just tell us when that's coming out, and remind us of the title, and maybe where we can find it, so we can support you as you have supported us so beautifully and generously tonight.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I am, and I can drop the link. I know you dropped the link to my website. Thank you. I can also drop the link to to more information about the book. So the book is called Welcome Wonder, a season of practices to curate an awe-filled life. And it is a book that I'm gonna just pick on Marla again. She yelled at me for the entire Writing for Your Life conference last year. She's like, "You can write a book," and I was like, "Oh, I'm trying to write a book." She said, "Yes, you do." And that her, I've been writing for about a year and a half at my publication of Earth and of Stars, which you can find information about that on my website as well. And that and some chance, if you will, meetings with some people have led to, and when I say yell, I mean yell in the kindest, most loving, mildly pushy way. Um, but all of those things kind of lined up for this book to come out. And it is my gift to the world as an invitation of wonder over the cadence of one season, 3 lunar cycles. And it's supposed to be slow. It's reflections and some questions. You can do it daily. It's a little bit like a devotional. I don't love devotionals though, so I don't want to call it a devotional. But yeah, so I'm really, really grateful for yeah, it coming out. Oh, you asked when is it coming out? The original release date was supposed to be February 24th, but I just found out we have to push it back. And so check the website later this week. I should have a new date, but definitely March. It'll be out in March. Pre-orders are available now, though, and you can pre-order the book on my website. You can also pre-order a signed copy if you would like. So yes, and if you have questions about anything else, you can follow. There's a contact page on my website. If you're like, I have more questions for you, or like, let's do you work with individuals, like whatever, all of those things are there, and you can find a lot more about my work that I do around dignity and wonder. So yes, Marla actually helped me edit it, so she has read the entire book probably more than once. So yeah, thank you, you all. I'm just so grateful. If you have facilitated spaces before, you know that sometimes a space can be very quiet, and you all were not. And it's just a joy to have the interaction and the dialogue. So thank you for welcoming me in so warmly. Let's do one round of box breathing, and then I will send us out with a blessing. That's how I like to end my spaces. So we'll breathe together again. In, hold, out, hold, just do it once, and then after, bless you. All right, we'll breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. Thank you so much for being in this space and for being present. And may each of you find ease and writing from your whole place. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Writing for Your Life. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.